Welcome back into CyHawk Talk here on a Wednesday. No Sunday show because Ben is a boomer, had some technical difficulties, couldn't get his computer to cooperate on Sunday. So we are, happy to be back. He's got everything figured out and hopefully ready to drop some knowledge on the Cyclones. Maybe just give us the quick reaction to that loss to Cincinnati on Saturday since we didn't get to hear it on Sunday.
Yeah, as soon as I climb out from underneath this bus, you threw me right under. I'll give you my takeaway from the Cincinnati game, which was just an awful first half from the Cyclones, where the defense, couldn't stop the run, and Cincinnati scored 31 points in the first half, which was a throwback to Arrowhead Stadium last year when the Kansas Jayhawks ran all over the Cyclones. The offense was able to, muster a hugely important 8-point scoring drive at the very end of the second quarter that kind of got the Cyclones in this game. It ultimately ends up being an 8-point game where the Cyclones had one last gasp, at a lateral Hail Mary play. But this one didn't feel like a one-score game. Iowa State was beaten in this one. They got some of those defensive issues corrected. We'll see if it lasts in Colorado, but man, just one of those duds that the Cyclone defense was clearly trying to figure out what the heck he was going to do without those two players in the secondary, and they found out it takes a little bit of time to adjust.
I wasn't really locked into that one until shortly before halftime. And so when I think I clicked on it was like 20, 21 to 0, 22 to 0, something crazy like that. And I couldn't believe the score I was seeing. And then they ended up making it, I think, a one score game by halftime. So I thought maybe they were gonna weasel their way into a victory there, but Cincinnati was able to hold on. Certainly a surprising result for me. How surprised were you? I know you kind of predicted a win for the Cyclones on the show last week. How surprising was that, and how quickly did you realize that it was maybe going to go the wrong way for the Cyclones?
I think after the first couple drives, when Cincinnati went touchdown, field goal, touchdown, touchdown, I believe it went for the Bearcats. You realize that the Cyclones were going to have to, climb down or climb up the steep side of the mountain. It definitely, went wrong. Forgot what I was gonna say about that game. Yeah, it could have been. I think you really knew the Cyclones were gonna get into some problems, Ethan, when they're hamstrung with the kicking game. So instead of attempting some field goals from around 40 yards, that would have, I think, made this a much closer affair and kept the Cyclones in it. They were forced to go for some fourth and schmediums, I call them, some fourth and fives, some fourth and sixes that they weren't able to execute on. And that hampered the Cyclones big time. So I think after they missed on a couple of those fourth and sixes, you realize that they were going to be fighting uphill.
A lot of criticism circulating. Last one on Cincinnati. We can get into these games this week, but a lot of criticism on social media about maybe the attitude or the finish from the Cyclones. I know that specifically on the final play, plenty of people upset that I think it was Benjamin Bramer ran out of bounds with the clock expired and didn't look to pitch it back, but also maybe some issue with Taylor Mauser's play calling and aggressiveness, some accusations of giving up a little too early in the game. What's your general thoughts on those kinds of criticisms from the fan base?
I asked about that play, specifically on the lateral play where Benjamin Bramer, the snap happened with 6 seconds left. Throw it to the receiver, back to Burkle, and then by the time it got to Bramer, there were 0 seconds left on the clock. The explanation we got on Tuesday from offensive coordinator Taylor Mauser is that Bramer believed there was a second left when he stepped out. So I don't think it was a matter of him, giving up or mailing it in. I think he was truly trying to extend this game. Mauser took ownership of that. He said, "Hey, it's on me. I should have communicated that beforehand." I think maybe that was just a coach covering and raising his hand up to defend his player. In my opinion, you should have a little bit better of an internal clock when you take a snap with 6 seconds left, knowing that that's most likely going to be the final snap of the game. So it was a communication error, a mental error, rather than, I think, an emotional error of giving up for the Cyclones on that last play. And they really added, hey, ideally you're not in that position to begin with. So I think that was much more of the problem than Benjamin Bramer's kind of calculation on that last play.
And certainly not as bad a mistake as Amari DiMercado throwing the ball out of his hand before the end zone, totally costing my fantasy football team the win this weekend. I started both Cardinals running backs. I was like, I'm going to get one of them right, right? And then I looked at almost both of them were right, and then I ended up losing. I would have loved a touchdown there on a long touchdown.
I'm going to give you the same answer Campbell gave us. You shouldn't be counting on Mario DiMercado, the Cardinals running back, to go win you your week. That you shouldn't have been in that situation, Petrie.
You're right. You're right. I'll go talk to Bucky Irvin about being healthier this week. I'll go talk to Josh Jacobs about not having a bye week last week, and maybe we can get back in the lab and figure out how to win last week's game moving forward.
Just get in the film room. Next step at a time. Next man up. All the coaches' cliches. Pick your one.
Well, as my fantasy football team battles some injuries, because I know everyone loves to hear about some random dude's fantasy football team, the Hawkeyes are also battling some injuries at the quarterback position or injury at the quarterback position. Mark Gronowski, evidently, obviously, as we've talked ad nauseum, went down with an injury in the fourth quarter against Indiana, wasn't able to return. Hank Brown shepherded the Hawkeyes to a loss with as the starting or as the fill-in quarterback for the final three drives. And now it looks like it might not be Hank Brown if it's not Mark Gronowski, Jeremy Hecklinski, the third string quarterback, making his way onto the depth chart as an or option. Hank Brown still listed as the number one at the backup, but there's that or, and then it's Jeremy Hecklinski, the Wake Forest transfer. That's a guy we haven't seen get any snaps this year so far. Hank Brown got a little bit of mop-up duty against UAlbany, got a little bit of mop-up duty against UMass, and then the Indiana exposure as well. But after the bye week, Jeremy Hecklinski has made a move onto the depth chart, and he certainly raised some eyebrows when we saw that on Monday. And it sounds like on Tuesday when we got to talk to the coaches and players that he's a guy who's really taken advantage of the bye week and the additional reps with Gronowski out to really earn a chance at potentially starting against the Badgers. So certainly something curious to watch. And one thing that I think we really figured out because some people saw that and said, oh, this is just kind of maybe the Hawkeyes throwing up a smoke screen so that Wisconsin has Wisconsin's making Iowa prepare for three quarterbacks. Iowa's going to make Wisconsin prepare for three quarterbacks. I don't think it's a smokescreen. You look at when Hank Brown got here, he was the first transfer quarterback to arrive. He got here in time for bowl prep, so he got to do all the bowl preparation with the Hawkeyes in December up till the Music City Bowl. And then Gronowski shows up in spring, misses all of spring camp, but is able to at least go through and take those mental reps, do the thing where he stands behind the first string offense and point at the receiver he wants to throw to. Well, Hecklinski, he showed up well into spring camp a little bit. He didn't show up right at the beginning. He was a little late to spring even. So he's been playing catch up even more than Gronowski's been playing catch up. And so maybe this bye week was the first opportunity for him to really take advantage and show what he was capable of in the Tim Lester offense with an understanding of that offense. So I don't think it was a smokescreen. I think it's like, hey, this is a talented guy, and he's showing that he's capable of pushing Hank Brown for an opportunity there.
That's interesting. That was going to be my follow-up question. My inclination was Iowa was making Wisconsin prepare for every situation. And, for three different quarterbacks, certainly going to be fascinating to see who trots out there. Or maybe is there a chance we see multiple guys out there?
I don't think that's not really Iowa's style. I think you can go back to last year's Nebraska game to kind of be your guide here. And that's ultimately where I wanted to get to in talking about will we see Mark, won't we see Mark? The Nebraska game is your guide here. Last year, Brendan Sullivan got hurt in the UCLA game, and then it was Jackson Stratton for a win over Maryland. And then you get to that Nebraska game, and you're thinking, well, maybe we'll see Brendan Sullivan. And Sullivan was cleared. He was suited up, and he was kind of he was available. And on Tuesday, we had asked Kirk Ferentz, like, is it going to be Brendan Sullivan? Are we going to see him mixed in a little bit? How much are you going to use Brendan Sullivan? Is he going to be your starter, or is it going to be Jackson? And you said, oh, I think it's going to be Jackson. I think it's going to be Jackson the whole way through. And that at that time, Stratton was a walk-on quarterback who hadn't necessarily done a whole lot for the Hawkeyes, and it's like, whoa, you're just going to lean on this walk-on quarterback the entire time, and it ended up working out for him. And I think that was the Hawkeyes playing it safe. There was no need to throw Brendan Sullivan out there in a hampered state, a less than 100% state against Nebraska when you can get him healthy for the bowl game and have a full strength guy. And at that point, he was probably still in the future plans for the program. And then the offseason happened the way it did. Now he's at Tulane. But I think that's your guide for this Wisconsin game. If Gronowski is not 100%, I don't expect to see him. And Kirk Ferentz said it's going to be who looks the best on Friday. Ultimately, I think that Gronowski would look the best if he's 100%, and it would be him, no doubt. But I don't think they're going to rush him back and risk aggravating this injury and making it a more long term thing. Because for right now, he's just considered day to day, and his status for Wisconsin's up in the air. And I think that they might choose to throw a Hank Brown or Jeremy Hecklinski out there rather than lose Gronowski for an even longer period of time.
I figured you'd find a way to work the Cornhuskers into this conversation. And, this
I
conversation,
didn't say anything about Nebraska. It was just the game. It was just the game.
that's true. But it is a relevant conversation and going to be important to how this game plays out, Ethan, because you're not expecting Iowa to have the same success in the running game it had in this matchup a year ago. Why is that?
Yeah, I think that it really plays into the Jackson Stratton discussion again. When he was able to lead Iowa to a 2-0 record as the starter, it was really because they were able to lean on Caleb Johnson and the ground game to do what they did. I think you look at the Maryland game, it was really impressive on the ground. Nebraska, kind of the same story. Caleb Johnson made a splash play to get them in position to win the game on the last second Drew Stevens field goal. And that's kind of the formula, right? Is they just leaned into the ground game because it was a real strength last year, and they did that in Wisconsin against Wisconsin last year when Brendan Sullivan was the starter and rushed for more than 300 yards and 5 touchdowns in a 42-10 beatdown of the Badgers. It's not going to be the same story this year. Wisconsin's completely overhauled their personnel on the defensive line at linebacker, and they're one of the best run defenses in the country this year. They're ranked sixth right now. They're averaging just over 100 yards per game allowed. They hadn't no, it's 75 yards a game allowed. They're the second best in the Big Ten. Iowa's number one. Woohoo. I don't think it's going to be a similarly dominant game on the ground for the Hawkeyes because their rushing attack has been so down compared to last year. They're averaging 40 less yards per game. I wrote a story last week where through 5 games, which includes the Ohio State game last year, they had 16 explosive plays on the ground, which are runs of 20 or more yards. This year, they've only had 4 through the same span. Last year through 5 games, never rushed for less than 100 yards. Last week or against Indiana, only rushed for 92. So this is not the same ground game. It's taken a notable step back, and so they're not going to be able to lean on that the way they were when they were having quarterback issues last year. This week against Wisconsin, and that's because the Hawkeyes aren't as good. It's because the Badgers are much better. So don't be betting the over on the rushing prop, whatever it's at. I don't look at gambling lines at all. I'm not in that lifestyle, but if do not hammer the over on rushing yards for the Hawkeyes. That's my one piece of gambling advice for the week.
If there is some reason, for optimism about this Iowa run game, it is that they get Xavier Williams back. What's your read on, him getting healthy a little bit and also Reece Vander returning? What are you expecting to see out of those two?
Well, it's kind of funny. Earlier, when Kamari Moulton came back and Williams went out, Kirk Ferentz equated it to a prisoner swap. You get one guy back, you lose another, and it's kind of the same story this week. They lost Jazz Patterson 2 weeks ago against Rutgers, or 3 weeks ago against Rutgers, and then this last game, they lost Terrell Washington. So they keep losing running backs right when they get running backs back. So Jazz Patterson, T.J. Washington not going to play this weekend, but they get Xavier Williams back. I expect that it'll still be Nathan McNeil as the primary backup to Kamari Moulton because Nathan McNeil's shown to be, a capable runner. He's got some wiggle. He's got some explosiveness. The only thing that they really need Xavier Williams for is his ability to run physical and kind of grind out yards, which is what they lacked against Indiana. Jazz Patterson and Xavier Williams bring that to the running back room. So sans Jazz Patterson, you need Xavier Williams to fill that physical runner role. I don't think they're going to. I think he'll probably be on a bit of a snap count, pitch count. So don't expect him to be an every down guy. Don't expect him to replicate his U Albany performance where he led the team in rushing yards. But it'll be nice to have him back and be able to get some physical grinded out yards. And then Reece Vander, that's going to be a guy who I don't expect to light the world on fire week one back from his injury. Kirk Ferentz said as much on Tuesday. He's going to be another guy that's on a pitch count. They don't want to rush him back. He's their hyper talented wide receiver that everyone was excited for coming into the year. And we have to remember he's only a sophomore, a true sophomore, not even a redshirt sophomore. So this is a young guy that they think is going to have a bright future ahead. They're not going to rush him back and risk, aggravating this foot injury and losing him for, 7, 8, 10 more games, cut into the offseason even a little bit. So don't expect Reece Vander to light the world on fire. It's probably going to be a 3 to 4 week ramp up rather than, we're going to target him 15 times against the Badgers.
I'm no Big Ten guy, so you'll have to remind me what trophy is on the line this week?
It's the Heartland Trophy. If you'd waited until the headlines, if you wait until the headlines, I'll give you a little bit of a description of what it looks like. But it's the Heartland Trophy, first introduced in 2004.
I can't wait. I saw the wooden turtle on the timeline this week and thought, man, these Big Ten trophies have gotten a little out of hand.
Who plays for the Wooden Turtle?
Ohio State is playing for a wooden turtle this week, I believe.
Okay, I was unaware of the Wooden Turtle. I was
It used
looking
to
to.
be a real turtle. And then you know what happens with real turtles after a while is they become wooden after they die.
Oh, I did not know that. But take me through some more things I don't know about, which is the Iowa State matchup this weekend. What's your number one thing? Looks like protecting Rocco Becht is maybe top priority this week.
For certain. And not only for this game at Colorado, where Rocco Beck's going to be an important player as he is every week for the Cyclones, but long term. You know, Rocco Becht has taken some big hits. I wrote about the massive hit he took on a targeting penalty last week in Cincinnati. And Cyclone fans, you know what I'm talking about. You never want to see the starting quarterback take a blow like that. So it's going to be important to see how Rocco Becht protects himself, you know, how Iowa State protects him. I asked Taylor Mauser, the offensive coordinator this week, if there are times when he scratches off play calls, you know, because he doesn't want his quarterback on a designed run taking a hit. And he said, absolutely. We recognize how important Rocco is to the success of this entire team. The problem is, you know, you don't want to to take away from what makes Rocco Beck special, which is his warrior dog mentality, specifically in these RPOs, the run pass options, when he's so good around the goal line and he chooses to go put himself in harm's way. Right after the medical tent, you know, he popped right out of it and Rocco went on a 5 yard run down at the goal line. So he's certainly, you know, not going to shy away from that contact. After the game, we asked him how he was feeling, and the only word to describe it was an expletive because he was not feeling great after that win at Cincinnati, after that loss. So protecting Rocco Becht, paramount on Saturday, as it will be for the remainder of the season.
College football 26, they introduced the wear and tear mechanic where you can lose health over the course of the season. It goes from, bright green to a lighter shade of green, yellow, red. You got those four quadrants. Once you get to red, you basically get injured the moment you get touched on the field. Where do you think Rocco Becht's at on the real life wear and tear meter if you were to, put a pin on it?
Yeah, he told us he was evaluated for a concussion and an ankle injury last week at Cincinnati. And you know, it's so tough to speculate on that with, hey, how close are you to another head injury or another concussion? Because, you know, I feel like you can't really control when those happen, but certainly I don't think Rocco's in the green, and I don't think he's operated in the green on your health meter for a lot of his career, but it hasn't stopped him. He's been an Ironman, has not missed a single start. So Rocco, he's a warrior, and he's going to go out there, and he doesn't need to be in the green, I don't think, to go play.
Quarterbacks aren't getting hit if they're getting rid of the ball quickly. What can you tell me about the receiver core and maybe one guy who's got a big return coming up this week?
Chase Sowell, Iowa State's now wide receiver one. I think we can confidently say that, Ethan. We've been kind of guessing at who's going to be that guy who steps up. Couple games in a row now, Chase Sowell has proven himself to be that guy. And it couldn't have come at a better time for him. He returns to Colorado, where he started his career. Chase was in the room, you know, for part of the team that Deion Sanders came in and kind of cleaned out. They told him, you know, he wasn't good enough to stick around and be a part of Colorado's core under the new football coach. So all he does is go to Eastern Carolina, ball out, come to Iowa State, get ramped up, and now he's balling out again. So I'm curious to see what kind of impact he'll have on Saturday against his old team. You have to think there are some emotions involved in it. And I think, you know, Matt Campbell said, we've had emotions. You know, Rocco Becht returned to West Virginia last season and was able to turn in one of his best games when his dad was getting inducted into the Ring of Honor. So it's going to be interesting to see how Chase handles this, but I don't think it can come at a better time for Chase Sowell, who's finally kind of turning into the wide receiver one the Cyclones have needed.
maybe the wide receiver one debate for Iowa State not as fun as the wide receiver one debate for the Cyclones was last year when we were talking Jalen Noel and Mr. Consistency Jaden Higgins. So I guess what makes you confident in labeling Chase Sowell wide receiver one?
I think you look at where Rocco Becht's now targeting through the first few games. Sowell, of course, we've talked about on the show, has missed a lot of time in camp, and I think he came in a little bit, behind all of the other receivers in terms of possibly connection with Rocco or first reads. We've now seen Rocco really look to Chase Sowell on some of his first reads, and you see that connection athletically, physically. I think Chase Sowell is your most dominant receiver in terms of physical traits, and he's shown that. He was again, I thought looked pretty good. He left the Cincinnati game early with a shoulder injury. He was looked at, and he comes back and is able to still have an impact in that game. So I think we've seen him now after Iowa State's first bye week kind of get fully integrated into this offense. And because he's now fully integrated, he's able to let those physical traits show as a true wide receiver one.
Speaking of looking good and maybe nicked up with a couple injuries, let's talk about this Cyclone men's basketball squad for this season. Media day today, what were your top takeaways or top takeaway from your first chance to really get to see the team?
I felt bad for Miss Heisey, Nate's mom. She's gonna have to look at her son on his last media day with a big old band-aid over his eye. And I also talked to Dom Plata, the freshman out of Germany, and he had a big old black eye. You think, man, what's going on at Iowa State's basketball practice? That's just TJ Otzelberger's style. Iowa State is getting after it in their practices leading up to the season. First exhibition game is a week from Friday. So basketball season right around the corner. We had a lot of fun going in there and talking with, everybody on the Cyclone team, from Otzelberger to Taman Lipsey to, just about anybody you could think of. All of the new players. I did some more TikTok and Ethan. We're gonna have some fun content going up on the web at quadcitytimes.com and also the TikTok and the YouTube that we're growing. So be on the lookout for that. Just a fun day at Media Day. And the note maybe Cyclone fans are curious about is how is Taman Lipsey coming along? Of course, he was diagnosed with a grade 2 MCL sprain in his right knee. That was a week ago at this point, 2 weeks ago. And Taman, I saw him today, talked to him for a little bit. He was kind of limping around a little bit. You could tell he was taking his brace on and off as pictures required, but he's starting to move around a little bit more. He is no longer wearing a straight leg brace. He's no longer on crutches, doing some stuff in the pool now. So he's starting week 3 of his 4 to 6 week recovery period. That timeline staying pretty consistent. Nothing really changed there. So I think we'll see Lipsey probably return to this lineup right around Iowa State's November 3rd opener at FDU. I'd personally be surprised if we see Lipsey for either of these exhibition games against Creighton or Northwestern.
Speaking of social media, I saw Milan Momchilovic taking over the Twitter, and he said, "Go Brewers!" And I can't agree with something more from the on Iowa State account. Go Brewers, absolutely. They're looking like they might be a World Series contender. What do you think that the Cyclones are going to be contending for this year? If you were to make an early prediction,
I have a tough time saying that the ceiling is as high as it was last year. Iowa State peaked at number 2 around January, and gosh, it felt like Iowa State was every bit of a national championship contender. They're gonna have to prove that to me this season. I think they can absolutely contend for a Big 12 championship, which means the Big 12 champ is in any national championship conversation. But I think the Cyclones have a little bit more work to do in terms of proving with these young guys, the Jamarian Bateman, who's going to be maybe the biggest offensive impact freshman, Kalian Torre. Well, what can he do? Potentially backing up Taman Lipsey in the backcourt. Some of these freshmen are going to have to prove that they can shoulder some of the load left by Keyshawn Gilbert and Curtis Jones before I declare the Cyclones national championship contenders. At this point, you'd love to see them make a Final Four. I think that's something that they missed out on, and TJ Otzelberger hasn't been able to accomplish yet. So I'm going to put them as Final Four contenders, and we'll see if they can prove to me if there'll be anything more.
Zoom's telling us our time is running out, so we better get to these Sunday's headlines today, right after this.
Obviously, a tough one. What are your first takeaways, I guess, from today's matchup?
Yeah, they're a great team. I think what hurt us is we didn't come out fast, honestly, on both sides of the ball, and we just got to be better, and we know that. We know we shot ourselves in the foot early on, but we just got to be better detailed and have better precision on stuff, and in certain situations. And that's what Big 12 is for. You go on the road, and every team, any team can win any single day, and I think that's what happened today. It's just that team wanted it more than us. But what I am proud about our team is we continue to fight. We were continuously in this game, and it just showed you how much these guys love this team, love this game, and you're going to see a way better Iowa State team next week at Colorado.
Welcome back to CyHawk Talk on a Wednesday, talking Sunday's headlines today with Ben Hutchins, the Iowa State beat reporter for the Quad City Times. Ben, what can you tell us about what you expect from this Colorado matchup for the Cyclones?
Running on Ralphie is my first headline. Ralphie the Buffalo, he's going to get to do the running first, but I think Iowa State gets to do the running second. We'll see if Carson Hansen's back. He's battling a concussion. Injury report comes out Wednesday night. He's a questionable for this game, but I think even Abu Sama could get the job done against this Colorado defense that gives up 180 rushing yards per game. I think Abu in this Cyclone offense is going to be able to run the ball toward a victory. So I'm going to take that as my first headline. And then the Cyclones are going to have some mile high expectations. We can forget, how quickly the pendulum swings between a win and, a loss at Cincinnati has everybody feeling down. I think if the Cyclones are able to get back on track at Colorado, then they get into a bye week. Man, the possibilities are endless at that point. You start to maybe dream a little bit big if you're a Cyclone fan. So I think the Cyclones will emerge from this one with mile high expectations. And my last headline, Ethan, is good for the soul. Sowell, if that makes any sense at all. Chase Sowell, I think, is going to have a big game. And it's going to be good for his soul, man. He's going to be going back to Colorado with a little bit of a revenge narrative. No ill will, he says, between him and the Buffaloes. But I think it'll be good for his soul and Sowell as he has a big game in his return to Colorado.
Speaking of big games, Iowa gets the rivalry matchup with the Badgers this week, and I think that this is going to be a great reminder for Hawkeye fans that what can happen when you lose your identity and you move on from maybe a legendary coaching situation. The Badgers had a lot of success in the mid 2010s with Paul Christ, and they kind of moved away from that, went to Luke Fickell, and he tried to change the Badgers' identity, and it's been all downhill. So number one headline is going to be, at least we're not Wisconsin. There's a lot of parallels between these two programs, and just in terms of how they became real prominent teams in the Big Ten, and even in what they're currently facing with Iowa. Like, hey, we might start three different quarterbacks, and the Badgers saying, yeah, we might do the exact same thing. I think for Wisconsin, it's because they don't really know who their best quarterback is. I think for Iowa, it's because, hey, we think all these guys are really good, but we know who our best guy is, and he might not be available. And I think that's going to be an opportunity for Hawkeye fans to, instead of looking at the Oregons, the Ohio States, and the Penn States of the world and saying, man, why can't we beat them? They're going to be able to say, well, at least we're not the Badgers. I think that's where Iowa fans are going to be at. And then moving on to brought back the bowl. I told you I was going to tell you a little bit about what this trophy looked like. It's a bronze bowl, and I think that Iowa is going to bring it back. They're going to have to take it to Madison with them. They got it in their possession right now. Sam Phillips, wide receiver, transfer from Chattanooga, said it was in the weight room on Monday to give them a little idea of what they were playing for. They're going to take it with them to Madison, and then I think they're going to put it right back on the team bus and bring it right back with them. I think they're going to win their fourth straight, and that's going to lead into another good night. Fourth night game for the Hawkeyes this year. Played two at home against UAlbany and UMass, and this will be their second one on the road after beating Rutgers in a Friday night game. And I think it's going to be another good night as they get the win, and all Hawkeye fans are able to go to sleep with a smile on their face and start thinking about that next night game against Penn State in Kinnick Stadium, where it might not keep up that trend of undefeated in night games. That'll do it for Sunday's headlines today. We'll be back on Sunday, barring Ben's computer pooping out on us again. Thank you for watching.